9 people suspected of being part of a violent far-right group which allegedly plotted to overthrow the government are going on trial. Prosecutors say the ringleader was a businessman and German aristocrat called Prince Heinrich Reuss. The alleged conspirators face charges of terrorism and high treason. It's claimed their goal was to install Reuss as a modern-day emperor.
This was the moment Prince Heinrich Reuss's fairy tale came crashing down. His alleged plan was simple: storm parliament and overthrow the German government. But authorities pounced before the plot could unfold. More than 3,000 officers were involved in the December 2022 raids. It was one of the biggest anti-extremist raids in German history. At its heart, Heinrich Reuss, a businessman and self-styled German aristocrat. He is accused of leading the plot. At his hunting lodge, he and dozens of others are alleged to have hatched a plan to violently overthrow the government. The group is linked to the right-wing extremist Reichsbürger movement, or Citizens of the Reich. Police say they conspired to establish a new German state based on the old empire from the late 19th century, with Prince Heinrich as emperor. Among its members, former police officers, soldiers, and a former politician for the far-right AfD party. Prosecutors allege the network had access to a huge arsenal of weapons.
The whole affair is really a big burden for our democracy, and we really need transparency. Who is behind this grouping? What went wrong that they could operate so long without having been seen?
Now, Prince Heinrich and his fellow suspected conspirators are set to stand trial, charged with planning an act of treason and membership of a terrorist organization.
And we're joined now by Professor Kai Arzheimer, who's from the Johannes Gutenberg University in the German city of Mainz. Welcome to DW. Thanks so much for your time today. The members of the far-right group on trial today are part of what's known as this Reichsbürger movement. Tell us how dangerous this movement is and how concerned German authorities should be.
Yeah, it's quite a heterogeneous movement. We estimate that it has about 20,000 members, and many of them are just cranks, just people who have a grief with the state and are not very much into organization. But then again, there are structures, emerging structures in the Reichsbürger movement, and the plotters that go to court today are probably the biggest such structure. It's about 27 people, I think, who are going to stand trial, and they had arms, they had concrete plans to overthrow the government. So German authorities are rightfully concerned about these guys.
And how does this movement fit within the rise of right-wing parties across Europe?
They used to be at the margins of the fringe, if you wish, but they have become more popular, especially during the corona lockdowns, when too many people spend too much time on the internet. And so they're now a force to be reckoned with, and there's a certain degree of overlap between them and the AfD party and more traditional right-wing extremist actors in general. Also, there's a link to the American conspiracy scene. So many of them who are going to trial today also bought into the QAnon conspiracy. They believed in children being kept underground for the benefit of the elites, and so on and so forth. So it's becoming slightly more mainstream within the sector of far-right politics.
And it is a movement that seems to attract all sorts of people, doesn't it? I mean, we've got former police officers, soldiers, a former judge, an aristocrat, which begs the question, to what extent has this movement infiltrated German society? I mean, is it even more than we might suspect?
Well, it's difficult to say what's going on under the surface. But I think we're rightfully worried about their influence in the security apparatus. So former policemen, former elite soldiers, that's very concerning because these people have weapons training. They're trained for special operations. And if they can infiltrate the very structures of the state, then I think there's ample concern. There should be ample concern.
OK, so the next question should obviously be what needs to happen to stop, the spread of this kind of movement, these kinds of ideas?
Yeah, I think before we start stopping the ideas, there's the very basic task of surveilling this movement, of having stricter security checks on police officers, on soldiers, on people in the public administrations who might have sympathies for that. Having said that, as I said, it's really a fringe movement in terms of its ideology. It's not a mass movement. It's more about people getting into critical positions that we need to identify.
OK. And so do you see, the recent crackdowns being effective in stopping the growth of this movement? Or do you see the potential for it getting bigger and more mainstream?
I think it was quite an effective operation, and it's very reassuring that the authorities are finally taking this seriously. I mean, scientists and researchers have been going on for years that this is not just a movement of harmless natters, but people who really want to overthrow the government and who really do not accept the authority of the state. So it's reassuring that the state is finally coming down hard on them.
Let's get more from our political correspondent, Giulia Saudelli, joining us in Berlin. Giulia, good morning. How advanced was this group's alleged coup plan to storm the German parliament when the police arrested them?
Well, investigators and prosecutors believe that the plans were really concrete. We've seen from the investigations that they had already planned to overthrow the government with violence, wanting to storm the parliament, arrest ministers and politicians, and they were even prepared to take into account that there would be people killed in this operation. They had already started setting up regional, local military units to carry out this kind of violent overtake of the state. And they also had a huge arsenal of weapons ready to be used, up to over 300 firearms they had started collecting. And they also had plans in place to set up a government once this violent part of the plan had been carried out. And Prince Heinrich Reuss was meant to be the head of this government, and also a former member of parliament for the far-right AfD party was meant to take over the justice ministry. So investigators and prosecutors believe these plans were quite concrete, and this was not just a group of conspiracy theorists coming together with vague plans.
Another 2 trials are also planned, I believe, including one for Prince Heinrich Reuss, the man it's claimed the group hoped to install as Germany's new leader. What more can you tell us on that?
Yes, so the trial starting today is looking at what investigators have defined as the military arm of the group. This includes 9 people, and then there will be 2 more proceedings starting in the next few weeks, one in a couple of weeks in Frankfurt, which will include those that investigators have defined as the ringleaders, including Heinrich Reuss. But these proceedings are considered a mammoth case in Germany, with hundreds of witnesses being called to the stand, thousands of documents having to be looked at, and this is a trial that prosecutors have dubbed one of the biggest state security cases in post-war German history, and it is believed that the proceedings will go on through to 2025.
And apparently this is just one group out of the larger so-called Reichsbürger movement. What more can you tell us about them?
Yes, exactly. The broader, loosely defined Reichsbürger movement counts, according to German intelligence services, up to 23,000 people. These are people who don't recognize the current German democratic state as the legitimate form of government. They believe that the legitimate form of government is the Reich, the empire that was in place until 1945. Parts of them have far-right extremist leanings, up to 5%. And there are also parts of the Reichsbürger movement, up to 2,300 people, who are believed to be ready and capable of violent actions, also because a few hundred of them have legal permission to own up to one firearm, one weapon. So investigators keeping a close look on the general and broader movement, too.
JGU Political correspondent Giulia Saudelli, thanks very much for that.